You know, sometimes in life, weakness doesn't always show up in your muscles. Weakness shows up in your mindset, in your choices, in your character. And the truth is, many people walk around thinking they're strong because they can shout louder, because they can fight harder, or because they can fake confidence. But real strength is quiet. Real strength is consistent. Real strength is proven when life pushes you down and you still get up. So today I want to talk to you about 5 signs that you are weak. Not to judge you, not to condemn you, but to challenge you so you can recognize them and break free from them. 1. You quit when it gets hard. One of the clearest signs of weakness is the tendency to quit when life gets hard. Quitting doesn't always look like throwing your hands in the air and announcing to the world, "I give up." Sometimes quitting shows up quietly in those moments when you convince yourself, maybe this isn't for me, or when you say, "I'll try again later," knowing deep down you don't really mean it. It shows up when the excitement fades and reality sets in. Anyone can feel strong at the start of the journey, when the vision is fresh, when the goal feels inspiring, when everyone is clapping and cheering you on. But real strength is proven when the journey no longer feels glamorous, when the applause dies down, and when pain and pressure are the only companions by your side. Think about it, how many people start the new year with resolutions? The gym is packed in January, full of people with determination in their eyes. But what happens by February or March? The crowds thin out. The same people who were so committed to change suddenly find excuses. Why? Because the journey stopped being fun. Because soreness, fatigue, and discipline started knocking on their door. Because results didn't come overnight. And that is the heart of weakness. Wanting the reward but refusing to endure the process. Strength is not about how loud you start, but how steady you finish. Weakness is revealed when the first obstacle comes and you retreat instead of advancing. Consider the story of Thomas Edison. History tells us that it took him more than 1,000 failed attempts before he successfully invented the light bulb. Now imagine if he had given up on attempt number 200. Imagine if he had said, "It's too hard, I don't think this will work." You and I might still be living in darkness. The truth is, the very things that make people great are often hidden behind doors of difficulty. Those doors will never open to the quitter, only to the one who refuses to stop knocking. Quitting when it gets hard is also dangerous because it trains your mind to accept defeat as normal. Every time you walk away when it gets uncomfortable, you build a habit. That habit says, the moment it's painful, I stop, and habits, once formed, become the foundation of your life. You may not notice it at first, but over time you start quitting on yourself in every area. You quit on your health, you quit on your relationships, you quit on your dreams, you quit on your future. Weakness becomes a cycle, and unless you break it, you will always lie beneath your potential. Look at athletes for a moment. Do you think champions succeed because it's easy for them? Absolutely not. They succeed because they train their minds and bodies to endure the pain others are unwilling to face. When you see an Olympic runner standing on the podium with a gold medal, you're not looking at talent alone. You're looking at thousands of hours of sweat, sore muscles, tears, and early mornings when they wanted to stay in bed but didn't. They made a choice not to quit. And that's what separates the strong from the weak. Here's something powerful to remember. Pain is temporary, but quitting lasts forever. The soreness in your body, the fatigue in your spirit, the rejection from others, those things will fade. But if you walk away from your goals, the regret will stay. Years from now, you may look back and wonder, what could I have become if I had just held on a little longer? That question has broken more hearts than failure itself. I'll be real with you. Life will test you. Life will push you. Life will make you want to quit. But weakness gives up when it gets hard, while strength whispers, keep going, just one more step. The people who succeed are not the ones who never struggled, but the ones who refuse to let the struggle define them. Weakness gives up, but strength presses on. Tutti. You blame others for your failures. Another sign of weakness is when you spend your life pointing fingers at everyone else instead of taking responsibility for your own actions. Weak people are always searching for someone to blame, whether it's their parents, their boss, their friends, the government, or the circumstances they were born into. Now don't get me wrong, life is not fair. Some people are born into privilege, while others are born into poverty. Some people grow up with supportive families, while others experience neglect or abuse. Some people get opportunities handed to them, while others have to fight tooth and nail for every inch of progress. But here's the truth: blaming others may explain your pain, but it will never change your situation. Responsibility is the only bridge between where you are and where you want to be. When you blame others, you're actually handing away your power. Think about that for a moment. Every time you say, "I can't succeed because of what they did to me," you're putting the steering wheel of your life into someone else's hands. You're admitting that your future depends on someone else's choices. That is weakness. True strength is when you say, "Yes, people may have hurt me. Yes, life may have knocked me down. Yes, I didn't get the same start as someone else, but I am still responsible for where I go from here." That is the mindset of strength. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine two students who both grew up in poverty. They both face the same struggles: limited resources, little guidance, and daily challenges. One spends his entire life saying, "If only my parents had money, I would be successful. If only my school was better, I would have achieved more. If only the system was fair, I wouldn't be struggling." The other student looks at the same situation and says, "It's hard, but I will find a way. I may not have the same advantages, but I can use what I do have. I can study harder, I can work longer. I can keep going till I create opportunities for myself." Now tell me, which one is stronger? Which one will actually rise above the circumstances? Not the one pointing fingers, not the one waiting for the world to fix itself, but the one who takes ownership. Look at the story of Oprah Winfrey. She had every reason to blame others. She grew up in poverty, experienced abuse, faced countless setbacks. If she had chosen the path of blame, she could have easily said, "The world is against me. I cannot succeed." And nobody would have judged her for it because her pain was real. But instead of blaming, she took responsibility for her future. She decided to use her pain as fuel, not as an excuse. And today, she stands as one of the most influential women in the world, not because life was fair, but because she chose responsibility over blame. Blaming is easy, and that's why it's so tempting. It gives you temporary relief. It allows you to say, "It's not my fault," and feel justified in staying where you are. But what blame also does is chain you to your past. As long as you blame someone else, you don't have to look in the mirror. As long as you blame someone else, you don't have to face the fact that maybe you could have done more, tried harder, or thought differently. Blame is a shield for the ego, but it is also a prison for the soul. And let's be honest, everyone has someone they could blame. The employee blames the boss blames the economy, the student blames the teacher, the athlete blames the coach, the husband blames the wife blames the husband. But in the end, blame doesn't move you forward. It only keeps you stuck in the same cycle. I once read a study that showed people who consistently externalize their failures, that means people who always blame outside forces, are far less likely to reach their goals compared to people who internalize responsibility. Why? Because the first group spends all their energy pointing outward, while the second group spends their energy finding solutions. The weak waste time complaining, the strong spend time adjusting. So the next time you catch yourself saying, "It's their fault, they're the reason I'm here," pause for a moment. Ask yourself, even if they are to blame, what can I do about it now? How can I take control of my part? How can I rise despite what happened? Because the truth is, life is not about what they did to you, but about how you respond. Weakness reacts, strength responds. Weakness blames. Strength takes ownership. You let fear control you. Another sign of weakness is allowing fear to dictate your decisions and control your life. Fear, more than failure itself, has destroyed more dreams, silenced more voices, and killed more opportunities than anything else. Think about it for a second. How many times in your own life have you known exactly what you needed to do, exactly what step you should take, but you didn't do it because fear whispered, "What if you fail? What if they laugh at you? What if it doesn't work out?" Fear is sneaky because it often disguises itself as wisdom or caution, but deep down you know it isn't wisdom. It's simply weakness hiding behind excuses. Fear can paralyze you in ways that look invisible to the outside world. You might be smiling, looking confident, appearing strong, but inside your heart, fear has locked you in chains. You don't apply for the promotion because you're afraid you're not qualified enough. You don't start the business because you're afraid you'll lose money. You don't speak up in a meeting because you're afraid of embarrassment. You don't pursue the relationship because you're afraid of rejection. And little by little, fear robs you of your future. Not because you aren't capable, but because you allowed it to silence your courage. Let me tell you something, failure will never hurt you as much as fear will. Failure at least teaches you something. Failure gives you experience, wisdom, and resilience. But fear gives you nothing but regret. When you let fear control your life, you don't just miss opportunities, you miss growth. You miss moments that could change you. You miss the chance to discover what you're truly made of. Consider this: Michael Jordan, one of the greatest athletes of all time, once said, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I was trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed." Think about that. He admitted to failing thousands of times, yet the world remembers him as the best. Why? Because fear never stopped him from taking the next shot. Weakness would have told him to stop shooting, to play it safe, to avoid embarrassment. But strength gave him the courage to try again even after failure. Fear doesn't just stop you from succeeding, it stops you from even starting. And that's the most dangerous part. You might have a book inside you that never gets written because fear says nobody will read it. You might have a business idea that could change your life, but fear whispers, it's too risky. You might have a talent, a gift, a voice that could inspire millions, but fear tells you, stay quiet, don't embarrass yourself. And so you live with potential locked inside of you, all because you listened to fear instead of courage. What most people don't realize is that fear is universal. Everybody feels it. Even the strongest people, the most successful leaders, the most talented individuals, they all feel fear. The difference is not that strong people have no fear. The difference is that they don't let fear control them. Weakness bows to fear, but strength moves forward in spite of it. Let me give you a real-life example. J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter series, was rejected by multiple publishers before her book was finally accepted. Imagine if she had let fear stop her after the first rejection. Imagine if she said, "I must not be good enough. Maybe this isn't for me." The world would have missed out on one of the most successful book series in history. But she didn't let fear have the last word. When you allow fear to control you, your life becomes smaller and smaller. Your dreams shrink, your confidence fades, and you begin to settle for mediocrity because it feels safer than risking failure. But the tragedy of fear is that it doesn't protect you, it imprisons you. You may avoid failure, yes, but you also avoid success. You may avoid rejection, but you also avoid connection. You may avoid risk, but you also avoid reward. Weakness is surrendering to fear, but strength is learning to walk with it and act anyway. Fear will always knock on your door, but you don't have to invite it in and let it live with you. The difference between the weak and the strong is not the presence of fear, but the response to fear. You depend on others for validation. Another sign of weakness is when you constantly depend on other people's approval to feel worthy, when your sense of self rises and falls based on how much applause you receive. This kind of weakness doesn't always shout loudly. Sometimes it hides beneath the surface. You might look confident, you might act strong, but deep down your confidence is fragile because it's built on the shifting opinions of others. The moment people stop clapping, the moment the compliments slow down, your self-worth begins to crumble. That is not strength. That is weakness disguised as confidence. Think about how often in today's world people tie their identity to numbers on a screen. How many likes did my picture get? How many followers do I have? Did anybody comment on my post? For many, their mood, their self-esteem, even their sense of success rises and falls with those numbers. But here's the danger. Validation from the crowd is never permanent. Today they cheer, tomorrow they may boo. Today they build you up, tomorrow they may tear you down. And if your worth is tied to their approval, then your identity will always be unstable. Weakness is when your sense of self is fragile because it depends on applause. Strength is when you know who you are, even in silence, even when no one notices, even when no one is cheering. There's a saying that if you live for people's approval, you'll die from their rejection. And how true that is. How many dreams have been abandoned because someone said, "You can't do it"? How many talents were buried because somebody laughed? How many gifts were never shared because someone didn't clap loud enough? Depending on others for validation is dangerous because it means you are handing them the keys to your destiny. It means that your potential is limited by what other people think of you. And the truth is, Not everyone will believe in you, not everyone will support you, and not everyone will applaud you. If you're waiting for a standing ovation before you move forward, you will be waiting for the rest of your life. Let's look at history for a moment. When Walt Disney pitched the idea of Mickey Mouse, he was told that the character would never work, that a mouse would scare women and children. When Steve Jobs presented his vision for the iPhone, people said it was unrealistic, that it would never replace the devices people were already using. Both men faced rejection, doubt, and criticism. But they did not depend on the validation of others to move forward. They believed in their vision enough to keep going without the applause. And today, the world remembers their strength, not the voices that doubted them. Depending on validation is also dangerous because it keeps you trapped in a cycle of people pleasing. You begin to make choices not based on what is right for your life, but based on what will earn you approval. You choose a career path because it looks impressive, not because it fulfills you. You stay in relationships that drain you because you fear people's judgment if you walk away. You silence your true voice because you're afraid someone won't like what you have to say. That is weakness. It is weakness because it keeps you from living authentically. Strength is the courage to be who you are, even if no one applauds, even if no one agrees, even if no one understands. I remember reading a study that showed teenagers today experience higher levels of anxiety and depression than any previous generation. And one of the leading reasons is the constant need for social media validation. Young people are tying their sense of worth to likes, comments, and shares. If they don't get the attention they expect, they feel rejected. But here's the truth. Numbers on a screen do not define your value. Applause is temporary, trends are temporary, but your worth is not. The weak allow their confidence to be dictated by temporary noise. The strong anchor their confidence in something unshakable, something internal. And let's be real, depending on validation will drain you because you can never please everyone. No matter how hard you try, someone will always criticize. Someone will always doubt. Someone will always find fault. If you live for validation, you will exhaust yourself chasing approval that you can never fully achieve. But when you stop depending on others for validation, when you realize that your value doesn't need a stamp of approval, you free yourself to live boldly, courageously, and authentically. Weakness looks like needing the applause of others to keep going. Strength looks like standing firm even in silence. Weakness looks like chasing after approval. Strength looks like being secure in who you are, regardless of who notices or not. If you refuse to grow and change, one of the clearest signs of weakness is the refusal to grow and change. Life itself is a journey of transformation. From the time you were a child, your body has been changing, your mind has been expanding, and your experiences have been shaping you into who you are today. Growth is not optional, it is the very essence of life. But weakness shows up when someone digs their heels into the ground and says, "This is just who I am, take it or leave it." That phrase sounds bold on the surface, but underneath, it is an excuse. It is a shield to avoid the discomfort of growth. It is weakness because it chooses comfort over transformation. The truth is, growth is never comfortable. It requires you to face things about yourself you'd rather ignore. It forces you to admit mistakes, to confront flaws, and to challenge long-held beliefs. Growth often requires sacrifice, whether it's giving up toxic habits, changing destructive mindsets, or walking away from environments that hold you back. Weakness is when you refuse to do the hard work of evolving. Strength is when you look yourself in the mirror and say, "I am not perfect, but I can be better, and I will not settle for less than who I was created to be." Think about how many people live stuck in the same patterns year after year. They complain about their jobs, but refuse to learn new skills. They talk about wanting better relationships, but refuse to change their behavior or heal from their past. They dream about success, but never adjust their habits. It's like planting a seed in the ground and then refusing to water it, refusing to give it sunlight, refusing to nurture it, and still expecting it to grow into a tree. That's not how life works. Growth requires action. Change requires intention. Weakness is the refusal to invest in that process. There's a powerful story in nature that illustrates this truth, the story of the eagle. When an eagle reaches a certain age, its feathers become too heavy, its beak grows weak, and its claws lose their sharpness. At that point, it can no longer hunt effectively or soar with the same strength. If the eagle does nothing, it will die. But the eagle doesn't settle. It retreats to a high mountain, where it goes through a painful process. It plucks out its old feathers, breaks off its weakened beak, and waits for new feathers and a new beak to grow back. Only after enduring that pain does it emerge renewed, stronger, and able to live many more years. Now, imagine if the eagle refused to change. Imagine if it said, "This is just who I am, I won't go through that." It would not survive. Growth saved its life. The same is true for us. If we refuse to grow, we cannot thrive. The refusal to grow often comes from fear, fear of failure, fear of discomfort, fear of the unknown. Some people cling to the familiar even when the familiar is toxic, because at least it feels safe. They stay in destructive relationships, harmful routines, or limiting mindsets because stepping into something new feels frightening. But weakness bows to fear, while strength chooses growth even when it's uncomfortable. Weakness says, "This is all I'll ever be." Strength says, "I can change. I will change." History is filled with stories of people who embraced growth and transformed not only their own lives, but also the lives of others. Take Abraham Lincoln as an example. Before he became president, he faced multiple failures, failed businesses, repeated losses in elections, and deep personal struggles. But he never settled for who he was in those moments. He kept learning, kept growing, and kept changing. That willingness to evolve prepared him to lead during one of the most difficult times in American history. His strength wasn't that he was perfect. It was that he refused to stop growing. Refusing to grow is dangerous because it creates stagnation. And stagnation, over time, leads to decline. If you are not moving forward, you are moving backward. The world around you is changing every single day. Technology evolves, opportunities shift, cultures adapt, and knowledge expands. If you choose to remain the same, you will quickly find yourself left behind. Weakness settles for the comfort of yesterday, but strength embraces the challenge of tomorrow. So when you find yourself making excuses for why you can't grow, when you hear yourself saying, "This is just who I am," understand that those words are not strength. They are weakness speaking. Real strength is having the courage to admit that you need to change, the humility to seek growth, and the determination to keep evolving no matter how uncomfortable it may be. Growth is not easy, but weakness is refusing to try. At the end of the day, weakness is not about how much weight you can lift, how loud you can speak, or how tough you look on the outside. Weakness is about what you allow to control you on the inside. If you quit when it gets hard, if you spend your life blaming others, if you let fear run your decisions, if you depend on the applause of others, or if you refuse to grow and change, then you are choosing to live beneath your true potential. But here's the truth that should light a fire inside you: weakness is not permanent. It is not a life sentence. It is a choice. And just like weakness can be chosen, strength can be chosen too. Strength is built the moment you decide to keep going when quitting feels easier. Strength shows up when you take ownership of your life instead of pointing fingers. Strength is standing tall in the face of fear and saying, "I will not be controlled by this." Strength is knowing your worth without waiting for applause. Strength is being willing to grow, to change, to become more than you were yesterday. So the question is not, am I weak? The real question is, am I willing to stop being weak and start being strong? Because the life you dream of, the impact you want to make, the person you were born to be, that version of you will only appear when you choose strength over weakness every single day.